welcome back to our IRHSP series. Last week we had done our layer using this red violet shade, which is a tint different than this one. I don't know if you guys remember. However, I will just recap what we've done so far. We had done one texture layer using our red, two texture layers using our yellow, and one texture layer using the red violet, and one layer of our red violet model. Today, we're gonna add a little bit more to our guy. I want to bring a little bit more depth to him. So we're gonna add our blue layer. Now blue is one of those layers that depending on what your sculpt undertone is already, you have to determine whether or not blue is going to complement the coloring that you already have, or if blue is going to neutralize it too much. You can use blue without neutralizing by using just a different technique. For instance, using your texture sponges or your model sponges, doing your stamping a little bit further apart. Those things will help complement your color that you've already built up without neutralizing it. So I wouldn't go into doing any kind of washes of that kind of aspect. Today, I'm going to do blue model, and in order to do that, let's get mixing. All right, we have primary blue in the IRHSP, lovely blue, and we have our squeegee. I love this thing so much, you guys. It's just the best tool. I use it all the time. Of course, I got to plug it a little bit because I will be having that available on our website. I will put the link in the description later. All right, to get our blue going, I'm going to add about this much, fairly decent size, and that's all. What I had said in the past about using any of your pigments, I have noticed that using your liquid thin, if you're choosing to use liquid thin, with your pigment to mix first, it gets a little bit more creamy and it is easier to mix the pigment overall. This amount we're going to do equal parts with the liquid thin. It was about 4 drops. Remember, equal parts of your liquid thin to your pigment. That is the key for that one. Now, in order to get it to a good consistency, because like I said before, if it doesn't run on your plate, it's going to be way too bold, way too bold, way too thick of a paint. At this point, in order to help your paint be a little bit more of a thinner consistency and be able to flow a little bit easier, we're going to add our thinner. I have had people ask me, I thought that the liquid thin meant you didn't need to use thinner. Not necessarily. You can interchange these. You can use one, you can use the other, you can use both. The liquid thin is going to make your paint more creamy. It's going to help it have a more pigmented appearance, and it's going to have the ability to have that pigment be more suspended, where if you use just your thinner, your pigment won't be suspended. It's going to be just runny, okay? I like the liquid thin because by adding that, it is actually giving me that perfect consistency when I'm using my thinner. Now, I'm going to use basically the same amount of thinner that I'm using to my pigment and my liquid thin. So I did 4 drops of your liquid thin and about a pea size, maybe a little more of your pigment. So I'm going to double that, and I'm going to do about 6 drops to start. That will give me my idea of how thick or how thin our consistency is, and slowly add more if I need it. Now, let's say this blue is way too blue for you and you're really nervous about it. 1, trust the process. 2, you can change the tint of your blue by adding white. That will help soften it. Other ways you can do that is by adding your flesh tone. You can add the baby skin. It's going to look very similar to the Flesh 08 in the Genesis line, whereas Irresistibles, it's the baby skin medium. I really like this a lot. This is really nice to kind of soften it out. I'm not going to use it for this layer. However, you can do that if you choose. I've got a little bit of a run. It's still suspended quite a bit, so I'm going to add a little bit more of my thinner. I want it where it's just starting to kind of run on the plate a little bit. Added 4 more drops of my thinner to see where we're at. It's almost like a transparent appearance. That's looking really good. I want to have a little bit more flow, so I'm going to add just a couple more drops of my thinner. Mixing it up really well. That's looking really good. Oh yeah, that's perfect. That's what I want to see. The next thing I'm going to do, taking my color palette of brushes, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. I love this system. To me, this works out so good because I know exactly what color brush to use, so I don't have to constantly wash them. Underside, I keep my mixing brushes. The top are my mop brushes. So I'm going to grab my mixing brush for my blue, and I want to do more of a model layer with the blue. Blue is one of those colors that's going to help darken the skin tone a little bit faster, but you got to be careful with it. I will do a mini tutorial on making sponges, but for sake of time, I'm not going to do that right now. I will show you the difference between a couple of them though. One, the tone is a little bit different, and you can see this is more of your texture and this is more of a model. And the difference, to refresh your memory, the difference between your texture and your model is that texture is going to have more smaller holes. So the surface of the vinyl or the surface of your skin is going to look more bumpy, where if you use your model, it's going to look more veiny. So the holes are going to be larger. You want it to have more of that veiny appearance. So we're going to use this one. I'll try to remind myself not to get in frame. I have a tendency of doing that. I always hold my limb with my fingers. I try not to just like hold the head itself. Some people wear gloves, and you can do that too if you're comfortable. I don't care for wearing gloves. Using my blue mixing brush, I'm going to lightly, very lightly, almost paint the surface of my sponge. You're not pouncing it into your palette. You're not going to be dousing it really good. You can see that the color has already been taking really good. Once I get it started, then it goes a lot easier. You can see the surface of that sponge, how it got darker in those areas that were raised. That's the perfect amount. Starting with the back of the head, and you're going to use a very light pressure. Don't apply too much pressure, because the more pressure you apply, the more amount of product you're going to put down, which is going to get too dark too quick. So very light pressure. Stamp on that blue using a twisting motion. You can decide on your own what you like, if you want to see more of that model or if you want to see less of it. If you bring your model stamps together, it's going to appear less. If you have them further apart, it's going to be more obvious. We also will be using our dry brush to soften it. And I usually will use that dry brush almost always, depending on what I'm doing. But I really like how it softens that skin out a little bit more. Now, you can either do half of it and pounce it out and then do the other half, or you can do the whole thing and then pounce it out, or not pounce it out at all. I personally am going to pounce it out. Again, light pressure. I mean, I am very lightly applying that sponge, going over in different directions until I like what I see, using the angular portion of my sponge to get in around the ear. Be careful not to go on the ear itself too much. Go around the ear, the back of the ear, but like the edging of the ear, because that gets too blue too quick and it'll look kind of awkward. So I personally don't do the ears so much. I might do the inside of the ear, but not that perimeter of the ear and the back of the ear. But again, you gotta be careful for the back of the ear because you're getting the edge of this ear. And if you're not careful, the blue can sometimes get too pungent. So just being careful there. You can see it got a little bit there. Doing that circular motion, drawing my blue into the face. I'm gonna grab a little bit more of my pigment, and I'm just gonna start from the bottom. Gonna go all the way around over the eye. I know you guys are like cringing for those seasoned artists, but this is just a process that I like the way it looks, and there is no right or wrong way. It's the way you like. So do what's comfortable for you. If this scares you and you don't like it, don't do it. Now, I'm going to grab my dry brush and then I'm going to soften that texture, or not the texture, I'm going to soften that model by doing this pouncing, using my finger behind the eye socket, kind of pushing upwards so that way I can have good pressure on that eyelid, going around and around until I'm happy with what I see. It's looking good. Very nice. Gonna turn it over. Do the same thing on the back of the head. The more you pounce, the softer the appearance will be. What the dry brush is doing, it's dispersing the color versus taking the color away. So think of it as it's pressing that color out so it softens or puts feather edges around the actual stamp that was applied versus having that sharp defined stamp look. Does that make sense? Hopefully. All right, just double checking that I like what I see. Okay, that's looking good. Now, this is where I'm going to take my small brush, your liner brush, and we're going to go over some of those creases. You can see my liner brush. This is a real small one. I will put in the description some links on where you can get this. I'm going to use my pinky to stabilize my painting hand, and I'm going to go over those creases, very light pressure, going back and forth on the eye. I don't have the camera focusing on my painting hand too much. And before I move on, I'm going to take my dry brush. I'll use this small one. Pushing up on that eye socket from behind the head, I'm going to press that color in. You're not going to do a lot of pouncing with this portion. Very lightly press that in so that it's soft but worked in at the same time. That looks good. We're going to go around the nostrils. I usually do 2 passes where I start from one side of the crease and then go back to the other. That way I can ensure that I got good coverage of that particular color. All right, so we got those creases. I'm going to use the blue to outline the creases of the lip. That's looking good. And with that one, I'm just gonna tap a little bit. You're taking your index finger and your middle finger, and you're gonna push on the inside of that vinyl. For this portion, this is obviously your mouth, but whether it's the eye or the ear or whatever, that just helps your paintbrush or your dry brush to get into those creases a little easier. Now I'm going to take my next brush that's a little bit bigger than your liner brush. It is a little bit more thicker or wider. This one is a number 1. I don't honestly know the width of this one. I would say it's probably 1/8 of an inch. Oh, it's a round brush, and once you press it down, it kind of fans out, so it's about 1/8 of an inch, I want to say, and it's going to look like that. And I'm going to go in the corner of the eye. This is where you're almost putting some undertones down, and you're doing a tapping motion. So I'm tapping along the crease or the fold of the eye. Wherever you want to see depth, you're going to add your blue. So I'm going to add a little bit of the blue over the bridge of the nose, just at the center. And then I'm going to blend it out to the top of the lid and the bottom of the lid. So it almost looks like a V or a triangle on each portion of the eye, pointing to each other. So it's more of a soft angle, not just a line of blue. Hopefully that makes sense. I say that a lot. I notice little quirky things I do. Gotta get better at that. Tap, tap, tap. And I'm going to do lighter and lighter pressure to draw that blue out and not put down too much, but have it kind of fan out. I'm going to take my dry brush. This one is your filbert brush. I got to get another one. This one is very nice. Just pressing. I'm not going to do too much pressure because I want to keep it a little more vivid. The key is to press it out once, then go over the edges a couple of times. That'll soften the edges out, but not move that inner portion of the color too much, so that way it stays in place where you want it. And I'll turn my head around, double checking and seeing if everything looks good or if I want to add a little bit more or whatever. And then I'm going to add some in the corner of the eyes. Very lightly. Trying to remember not to get in the view of the camera. This crease under the eyelid, I did a little bit there as well. I'm doing not so much directly in the crease, but on the edges of the crease, because if you do directly in the crease, sometimes it can make the baby look like it's got a black eye, and we don't want necessarily that appearance. We want it to look like it has more depth and not like it's been socked in the eye. So I'm putting it at the top of the cheek, just at the edge of the under crease of the eye, doing that tapping motion again. And then we're going to take our dry brush. Then I'm going to press over the edges of that blue, making sure it's soft and not too bold. And that's looking good. Then we're going to do the center of the lip right in through here. Give that a little bit more color. I will add a little bit of blue inside the mouth. So I'm just adding it in the middle part of that lip as well. In the corners of the mouth. Let's hit that. And that is one thing I didn't do. I didn't press that out on the corners of the eye. Now every baby is different. So if your eye sees a different color or picks up on a different color, go with it, you know? What I see might be different from what you see. Your eye will be drawn to whatever feels natural, and whatever looks natural to you won't always look natural to everyone else. So I go with what's comfortable for me. Go with what's comfortable for you, where you want to see any depth. I'm going to go underneath that lip. So I'm going up underneath the lip and not necessarily on the chin. I'm doing the same thing that we did on the under crease of the eye, but on the fold of the bottom lip. I'm going to get my dry brush, press that out. That's looking good. All right, we're going to do the ear. We're going to tap, 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 tap. This is that spot. You got to be very careful, because if you get the blue on anything, it definitely doesn't look as natural. Tapping, tapping, tapping. Once I get it into the center of the ear, I'm going to draw it up in the ear. And I usually go just right around this portion into this fold through here and into this fold, going on the crease underneath the fold of the top of the ear. Press that out. Without picking up color, I'm going to use the same brush and I'm going to hit the back of the ear. See, I still have a little bit of color left on my brush. All right, that looks good. Doing the same thing to the other ear. Tap, tap, tap. Using the side of my brush to tap the part of the ear that has this angle here. You want to get the back side of that colored, so tap with the outside of your brush, or you can use your angled brush to get in there. Looking good. Going around that edge and through those creases there, top of the ear. Now here I'm not going to go all the way around. You can see how this side has a little bit more of a flatter edge than this side. So I'm only going to do this portion. This portion doesn't need as much depth than the other side. And then we're going to press that out. I got a little bit on the cartilage area on the top of the ear, so I use my dry brush to pounce it out. And then I will go back and I will double check that everything looks balanced. If I see something that needs more dry brushing, I'll go over it. Or maybe if I need to add a little bit more blue here or there, I will do that. But that looks pretty good. I'm going to do the crease on the bottom. And then there's a little fold of skin right through here. It's not necessarily a crease, but we want to accentuate that. Bringing that depth to that and hitting it with a dry brush. There's a crease on the back of the head, and I'm doing more of a rolling motion. You can see I'm barely picking up any color. Believe it or not, there's plenty of color right there. You can see how it goes on. We want it nice and soft and translucent. There's plenty there. And I'm gonna hit the back of the ear. I don't think I did that yet. With that brush. All right, the other areas that I'm gonna use the blue, I'm gonna need a bigger brush. So this one is the number 12 brush in this series. I'll find out what it is and put it in the description. And we're gonna do the same thing. You're gonna do this spinning motion with your brush to pick up the color. I'll pick it up so that way I don't have too much color and it's just enough. We want to do the indentations right around the temple area through here. So you're almost doing a triangular shape, and then on the bottom of the ear. So you're gonna do like backwards L through here and then a regular L through here. Does that make sense? I'll show you. Bringing this around. We want to do this backwards L. It'll feel like you're doing a lot of blue, but trust me, it's not as much as you think. And then I'm going to do it on the bottom of my ear, picking up a little bit more. Careful not to get on that fold of the ear. Doing a regular L, so you're going just under the back of the ear through here. You can kind of carry it out a little bit through the front if you see that your kit has a little bit more of a fold. And before I go to the other side, well, let's hit through here. I'm going to go around this nose a little bit. Careful not to get it on the nose edge itself. And then we're gonna take our dry brush. I want a little bit bigger of a dry brush. This one has a little bit more firmer bristles, so I can hit those edges real soft, but keep my pigment where I want it. So I'm going over the top first, or the outer edge of my blue, a couple times in the center, and then the inner edge. Then we're going to do the same thing on our L shape around the ear here, just hitting the edges of that blue, softening the edges out, but keeping your pigment in place. You can do straight up and down, you can do on its side, whatever's comfortable for you. If you see that the blue is too bold in any particular area, you can go over with your dry brush a little bit, like through here. I'm going to add just a little bit of pressure. My dry brush to soften that out. That looks really good. So you can see the difference between this side and this side. I've got some nice depth through there, and we want to do the same for this side. This side, you're going to do your backwards L. Go right above that brow bone into the temple, and then down just below the eye and the top of your cheekbone, or the baby's cheekbone. Drawing it towards that temple. I always do a tapping motion so I can see where I'm applying the color, and I can kind of soften the edges at the same time. We're going to do the same thing down in the ear, underneath where that fold is, and draw it towards the back of the head. Going to get our dry brush again, tapping the edges out. You're just moving that pigment around, kind of displacing it a little bit so you can put the pigment where you want it by using your dry brush. I'm going to switch my brush and I'm going to use a smaller one, and I'm going to do right underneath the nose next to the cheek. I'm going to actually go towards the cheek. He doesn't have a lot of a cheek, but I want to create more depth there, so that's why I'm doing this. I'm going to do it on the opposite side as well. Right through here. He's such a cutie. Tapping that out. This is where we need our angled brush. This one's your angled brush. Going to pick up our color. Very, very carefully, you're going to tap on the inside of the nose, on those edges. You're kind of tapping and pressing at the same time. Careful not to get it too much on the edge of the nose, then it looks a little awkward. At the bottom of the nostril, tap, tap. I'm gonna go right underneath the nostrils through here and on the bottom. Grabbing my dry brush, pressing that out. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. This would be considered more of your blue model slash undertones, and then we're gonna move on to the limbs. I'll be right back. All right, guys, time to do the limbs. For the sake of time, I am only going to do one leg and one arm because our video is already running a little bit long. The same concept is going to apply to the limbs as it did on the head. Anywhere you want to see more depth is where you want to focus on your undertones with your blue. But the first thing I want to do is I want to put the blue model down first, and I'll do my finishing touches doing my undertones with the blue. Using my mixing brush, I had stepped away so it evaporated a little bit, so I wasn't able to use it right away. And all you need to do if that happens is add a little bit more thinner. Just remember, you want your pigment to run on the plate pretty good. I don't want it too runny, but I don't want it too thick. You just got to find that happy medium when you reconstitute it. And then you're going to paint basically the top of your model sponge. We don't want to use a lot. You don't need a lot. If you are the type of person that likes to just press your sponges, your texture, your model, whatever type of sponge directly into your pigment, what's happening is you're picking up a majority of that pigment that's going to be left behind in the sponge. But for this, you don't need to do that. I'm going to start with the back of the leg, and where you start is really up to you. I like to start at the crease, especially when you have bent legs, because sometimes it's hard to get into those little areas, and I will actually take the limb and I pull it apart a little bit. It's been baked, so it's not gonna hurt anything, so when you pull it, it will be fine. And then I'm gonna go down the limb. With your blue model, I will do very lightly over the heel and the bottom of the foot. I know a lot of people do not agree with that. It's personal preference. I've seen many babies that have model everywhere. I don't put model on the tips of the toes or the tops of the toes so much. And I also will soften it using my dry brush. But I wouldn't leave it pungent and have like real defined model on the bottom of the feet. Going back to the top here, I usually go down in sections, so it's easier for me to keep track of where I'm at. How close or how far apart you apply your model is going to be entirely up to you. Just remember, when you're putting your stamps down, the closer together the model stamps are, the less defined they're going to be. The further apart they are, the more defined they're going to be. I want kind of a happy medium. Turning my limb over so I can make sure I've not missed anything. Hitting the side of the foot. And then I usually will do this. I'll set my foot down on the counter, or this is just another technique I do when I want to do the top of the foot, because I'm going to do that rocking motion, and by putting the foot down on the counter, it gives me a little bit more stability. I like to have a little bit more of that anchor. I'm going to do that rocking motion one time on the top of the foot. And that looks good. That's looking really nice. Right. Then we're going to take our dry brush and we're going to pounce that out just to soften it. Just like we did with the head. The whole purpose of the dry brushing is to displace the pigment so it softens or feathers out the edges of that model. So it's more of a blotchy / model effect, not so much of a real defined print. Now I'm going to take my liner brush. I'm going to use my small one, picking up my pigment. This is where I am very careful. And if you pick up too much pigment on your brushes, I use the sponge that I'm working with, whether it's your model sponge or your texture sponge or whatever, and I'll tap off my excess pigment right on the sponge, so I'm not wasting it. I try not to pounce anything or wipe anything off on my surface or my work area. However, that happens sometimes. You forget or whatever, you get a little bit of a mess. That will happen. But I try to keep it as clean as possible so that the risk of color transfer is lower, because there's times where you'll get pigment on your counter, and if you're resting your arm or something and then you go to pick something up, you may possibly have something on your hand where you transfer it onto your kit. So I like to try to keep this as nice and clean as possible so the risk is a lot lower. I'm going to use my pinky to hold the toes to stabilize it, and I'm going to go back and forth just a couple times on those creases between the toes. And then I'm going to go around where these creases are a little bit. You're almost doing like a little bit of a V, trying to keep my hand out of the way. Hitting the areas of the creases that we're accentuating. If it didn't have any creases, this is where you could apply your blue to create a illusion of creases. And then I'm going to do the back of the toes. If you get too much of that blue down, not a big deal. You're just going to go back, use your dry brush to work it out. I really like these dry brushes. I'm not sure where Esther got these, but we had gotten these from Esther's Irresistibles class. They're really awesome. I like them a lot because they're short, stiff bristles, and there's variations in sizes where it's really easy to use for whatever area you're working on. Like I had this smaller one for the creases in the little tiny areas, and then there's a little bit larger one for larger areas, but it's a pretty cool tool. I really like this. I believe she has it on her website, but I'm not 100% positive, so you'll have to go check out Irresistibles for sure to find out. And then I'm going to go in the creases, and I'm not doing all of them. I'm going to do just more of the defined creases because all of these are going to build up a little bit more natural when we apply our layers. I'm going to switch out my dry brush and using our filbert, pressing that in. I didn't pick up any extra color because I just want to hit a few of these creases. These are the little ones. I'll go in the back of the heel. Those bigger creases I'll go over a couple times. I'll pick up a little bit more of my pigment. I usually will drag my crease into the top of the foot so it gives a little bit more of a natural appearance, even if the crease doesn't go all the way up over the top of the foot. Now the top of my limb, or my limb itself, has already flashed off with the little bit of thinner that we've added to our pigment and the liquid thin, so it is okay to handle your limb. You want to try to minimize the touching of the vinyl, but it's going to be okay for just hanging on to it for a little bit while you're doing this. Little too much there, not a big deal. I'll go back and pick that up. Dragging that crease to the top of the foot. You can use the same sponge. I use the opposite end quite a bit, where if you apply something too much, you just pounce it up with the same sponge. And then I can go over those creases with my dry brush, just pressing them out ever so slightly. That looks good. I'm going to do the back of the leg. Actually, I'm going to do the back of the leg, but I'm going to switch this brush out for the next step up. This one is that number 1. I'm going to do behind the leg and hit these creases by the thigh. Let me hit behind the heel a little bit again. Just want that a little bit darker. Now I'm going to press those out. All right, now we're going to hit a couple of key areas with our blue as our undertone. The bottom of the foot, and I'm going to use the next brush up. It's a little bit bigger, just gives me a little bit more coverage of my surface. I'm going to apply it to the tip of the brush, and we're just going to ever so slightly tap right in the center of that foot, and I usually draw it in around the inside curve of the foot. you're making a backwards C right leg or your left leg, depending on how you're looking at it. Keeping my dry brush method, softening the edges a little bit. We're not taking it away. We're gonna do underneath the ankle bone, and if your ankle bone on your baby is not real evident, it's up to you whether or not you want to create more depth and give that illusion more of a ankle bone there. So this one, it has an ankle bone there, but it's not real defined. So almost an L where you go underneath where the ankle would be, and I'm gonna go along the back of the leg here where that tendon would be, and I'm going to draw this kind of forward and this up, doing a backwards L, again depending on which limb you're working on, whether it is backwards or forward L. But you're going to follow it up along the back of the leg right through here and then right through here. Doing the opposite side, and go underneath the ankle, bring it up along the back just above the heel. And how much area you apply your undertone, again, is up to you. If you have a doll that has a lot more of those indentations, then do more of your blue for depth. If it has less indentations and you don't want to have more depth, then don't do as much. It's personal preference and also depending on the kit you're working on. With like the creases, I will, the top of the foot through here, over that crease almost, bring it around a little bit. And then I'm gonna do the top of the foot where the ankle would be. Tap, tap, tap over the crease. And then I'm gonna press that out using our dry brush. Now I'm gonna take our blue, I'm gonna go on the tops of our toes a little bit. And then I'm going to bring it up a little bit through here. Dry brush, soften that out, and that's looking pretty good. Is I will hold the limb facing me or the foot facing me so that I can turn the foot at an angle so I'm looking down, and that's where I'm looking for any indentations that I want to emphasize. Underneath the shin, just above the ankle and above the foot. So I usually do one through here and one under the knee. You can see that there's usually an area that has a little bit more of an indentation through here and then a little bit over through here. And depending on how chubby or how thin your baby is, sometimes it's on this side. So it's almost encircling the whole knee, feathering it out so it looks more natural. I'm gonna take my brush, gonna create that hollow, tapping the edges out, softening it up a little bit. Now if this blue is too light for you, you can try using less thinner. I like to do a little and build it up versus doing too much. A little bit right through here, drawing it up into the thigh. I'm almost doing like a triangle through here. So this is gonna emphasize this muscle or where this muscle would be, because when you flex that muscle, it has that separation a little bit right through here. So it looks almost like a V around the knee there and up into the top. And I'm gonna get my other dry brush, hitting the edges, doing the same thing. So I'm looking down the limb, and I'm gonna do right in through here, which is basically the opposite side of that knee. And then we're gonna use our dry brush. If your limb has not flashed, do not handle it. Keep your hands inside the flange or inside the limb. If you need, you can also put your dowel inside there to have more stability. And I'm gonna do a little bit right on the corners through here. And then in this area. Little bit over through here. Okay, that's looking good. You would continue this on your other leg at home, so you can do that on your own time. And then we're gonna move on to our arm, our hand. First, we're gonna do our model. You can see how much color we have left from that little bit of pigment that we mixed up. Smaller batches are gonna be a lot better. But again, personal preference. I've noticed that it's a different way of painting than when you were with Genesis, if you were using Genesis, right on the inside of the arm up to the crease. And this is where I'm going to pull the arm open a little bit so I can get as close to that crease as I possibly can. Bring it down to the wrist. And then I've got my dowel in there because the opening of the limb is really small. It's hard for me to get my fingers in there. Picking up just a little bit more color, going on the back side. Down the wrist through there. Working in sections so I keep track of where I'm at. Down over the side of the arm, top of the arm. Now I'm going to set that arm down just a little bit so the hand has a little bit more stability as I'm rocking this stamp over the top of the hand. And I'm not going to do up the fingers. I'm going to go just at the base of the fingers, going on the side of the hand a little bit. And then I'm going to do the palm just a little bit, not the fingers underneath. Dry brush that out. So are you guys enjoying this? Are you learning something new? Let me know in the comments what your thoughts are. It definitely keeps me motivated to keep making videos when I see that it is helpful, or maybe I need to touch base on something I hadn't thought of or whatever. Let me know. I do appreciate reading your comments. Now I'm going to grab my little liner brush. I'm going to go over those creases on the inside of the palm of the hand. Go right through here. I don't do all of them. Like I said before, I'll do like the major creases and let those little creases build up. I'm going to do the crease behind the fingers, the creases behind and through this little spot here, around the thumb and at the wrist. Now we're going to take our dry brush and we're going to press that out. If you're heavy-handed, do the hands and the feet underneath magnifying glass. So sometimes I'll do that just so I have a little bit better control. I hit these creases, create, like that's a little heavy-handed. That's okay, I can touch that up. There's not really a crease, but it's more of an indentation between the fingers there, but I do want to hit that and draw it around the base of the finger. Doing that almost a V, going through the thumb, hitting those creases, going where the wrist would be, a little heavy-handed there, that's okay, and going around. Use our dry brush and soften that out. One area I don't do with the blue or with like creasing so much or very, very little is around the nail bed itself. And the reason behind that is I feel that right around the nail bed, that area can build up naturally as you're doing your layers. And then when you go to do your nails and the nail tips, you can accentuate the crease if you need to using your colors without having it be too dirty of a crease or standing out too much. But again, personal preference. I'm going to hit the inside crook of the arm. And there's a crease right through there, through here. Right up through there. Soften that out. We're almost there. This video is a little bit longer. Now I'm going to take my lovely brush to do the undertones. To emphasize them, I'm going to go the palm of the hand, where I'm going to go around this fatty part of the thumb and kind of in between where your thumb and your index finger are, and then draw it out a little bit through there. Using our dry brush, softening that out a little bit. So if you look at photos of veins on the internet, you'll see that all of your veins run down because your blood flow is running down into your fingers. If you want, you can put some shading or some depth where your veins are going to be once you apply those to give it a little bit more depth, but not necessarily doing the veins quite yet. So I'm going to take a little bit of my blue and go in a little bit of a random kind of squiggly spot, drawing it up the forearm a little bit, and then hitting the edges to soften that up. That will give it the veins a little bit more depth and a little bit of that three-dimensional appearance as you're building your layers. It's just a very, very soft, subtle way to do it. I'm going to go into the crease of the arm right through the corner, almost around where the elbow is, doing this triangular shape would point towards the inside crease of the arm and the flat edge of the triangle being on the elbow side. And that one looks really good. I probably don't need to do much dry brushing at all. Tapping that color. Now turning the limb, I'm going to look down the limb, look for those indentations that I want to emphasize. Right above the shoulder area, above this muscle, right through here, your bicep, there's an indentation. So I'm going to put a little bit of that blue in through here to emphasize that muscle. And I want to have a little bit more emphasis with this area through here with the muscle separating. So I'm going to bring a little bit of blue on this side and drawing it down. And then I'm going to hit it with my dry brush. All of this is going to be perception. So when you're looking at your kit, what do you see? What areas do you want to create that dimension? It's not necessarily going to be staring at you in the face. You have to look at it and envision where your muscle indentations would be if the baby was bending the arm or flexing or tightening the arm a little bit. That muscle is going to pop out a little bit. So then you would want to do more of that shading on the inside portion of the muscle. And then around the elbow, I do the same thing like we did on the knee. Has a little bit of a shadow or depth right through the bottom side of the elbow, the top of this muscular area. And looking down this portion of the arm, there's a little bit of an indentation through here. Probably got a little bit too much blue on it, and that's okay. So let's say you did get too much blue. Just take a cosmetic wedge and very lightly press onto that. Be careful of doing it too many times because what can happen is you can cause transfer, meaning if you had a lot of blue and then you pressed your cosmetic wedge over it and then you did it again, the first time you pressed it and the cosmetic wedge absorbed that color, when you go and press it down again, it's going to transfer back onto the vinyl and it's going to look like it's a double stamp. So be very careful of that. If it's a lot of blue, then I would use your dry brush and work it out and use your cosmetic wedge, just tapping very so lightly with the edge of it and not necessarily the flat edge. I go right where the wrist would be on both sides. I'm going to go a little bit through here. All right, that looks pretty good to me. I like that. So we got our first layer of the blue model along with some blue undertones done. You at home will finish the other arm. And then once you're done doing the blue model layer along with your undertones, you're gonna wanna go ahead and preheat your oven at 265 degrees with that oven thermometer, making sure that you're maintaining the temperature at all times. And you're gonna put your pieces in and bake that at about 10 minutes. After it's baked, we're gonna let that completely cool and then we'll move on to our next layer. So let's add to our color map so that we can keep track of where we're at. Put a little bit on here and we're going to do our blue. I'm gonna have to add more, it's hard to see it. Then you're gonna do one layer of that and then we're gonna add your blue undertones. All right, well, hopefully that'll help you keep track of where we're at, and it will definitely help me on track. All right, guys, I really appreciate you watching. I hope you're learning something new. I hope you're enjoying it. Make sure to let me know in the comments your thoughts, your opinions. Tell me what I can do to make it better with it. I want to be able to help as much as I can, offer those solutions to those that might be struggling or getting started. If you haven't subscribed already, make sure you do so and hit the little bell so that you get notified when I upload the next video. I'm trying to have a video come out every week or two, so watch for that. I'm shooting for Mondays, but we'll see how our timing goes. I really appreciate it again, and thank you, Esther, again for sponsoring us for this week's video, and I will see you guys all again very soon. Happy painting, friends. Bye-bye.